Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Eruvin. We are up to Perek Bet Mishna Alayev. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilun Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Aranbayev Neriyahu ben Burcha Israelov Menuchatam Began Eden. Amen. The Mishnah discusses the law of a well that is located in a public domain. A standard well which is at least 4 tefachim wide, 4 tefachim long, and 10 tefachim deep is a private domain. Therefore, it is biblically forbidden to draw water from a standard well that is in a public domain and put the water down next to the well. Now, this prohibition posed a difficulty to pilgrims traveling to the temple for the holidays of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, because it meant that they could not draw water for their animals on Shabbat from the wells along their route. So to solve this problem, the rabbis allowed pilgrims to use a unique arrangement of minimal makeshift partitions to convert the area around the well into a private domain so that they may take water from the well on Shabbat. The Mishnah describes these partitions and how they must be set up. Osin pasin laberaot. We may use the following boards to serve as partitions around wells. Arba'a diyumdin nir'in kishmona. 4 double posts that look like 8 boards, meaning 4 double posts that consist of 2 boards perpendicular to each other like the corner of a square, thereby having the appearance of 8 boards. Now, each of these 4 double posts must be placed at a different corner of an imaginary square or rectangle drawn around the well. The double posts are viewed as the beginnings of halachic partitions that extend along the entire sides of the square, converting it to a private domain. Since the well itself is also a private domain, it is now permitted to draw water from the well and put it down within this square. Whoever can see the diagram brought down in the Art School elucidated, diagram A will help visualize the case. Now, the commentaries explain these partitions should technically be disqualified in view of the rule that if a wall is more open than closed, meaning the total width of all the gaps exceeds the total width of all the solid parts, it is not a halachic partition like we learned in chapter 1, Mishnah 8. According to biblical law, however, this disqualification does not apply in our case. Since there are solid Amma-wide boards at each corner of the square is considered to be fully enclosed, despite the fact that its gaps are wider than the boards. Therefore, it's a biblical reshut yachid. Now, the rabbis ruled that it may not be used as a reshut yachid except by pilgrims traveling to the temple. And even in the case of pilgrims, the rabbis allowed them to use these partitions to draw water only for their animals. If it's possible for a person to climb in and out of the well and drink the water there, he must do so. Only if this is impossible may water be drawn from the well for a person to drink, as the Gemara explains on page 21a in Masechet Eruvin. Now, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, the Mishnah says. Rabbi Meir Omer, but Rabbi Meir says, Shemuna nir'in kishne masar arba'a diyumdin ve'arba'a fishutin. Rabbi Meir says we require 8 boards that look like 12, meaning 4 double posts and 4 straight ones. Now, like we explained, each double post looks like 2 boards, so that 4 double posts appear as 8 boards. Now, Rabbi Meir also requires 4 straight boards, making a total of 12. Now, the double posts are placed at the corners, and the straight boards are placed along the sides of the square between the double posts, as the elucidated shows us in diagram B. Now, the Rav explains, although it's only Rabbi Meir who mentions straight boards, Rabbi Yehuda also requires straight boards if the gaps between the double posts are too wide. And the Rav says the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir applies only where the gaps are between 10 and 13 and 1/3 amot. If the gaps are narrower than 10 amot, all agree that there is no need for straight boards. And if they are wider than 13 and 1/3 amot, all agree that straight boards are needed. And the Mishnah below is going to explain each Tana's opinion. And the Rav does tell us, the halakha Rabbi Yehuda, the halakha does follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the Mishnah defines the measurements of the boards, meaning each side of the double posts and each of Rabbi Meir's straight boards. Govhan asarat tefachim, their height must be at least 10 tefachim. And Tosfot Yom Tov says, we know 10 tefachim is the minimum height of any halachic partition. The uchban shisha, their width at least 6 tvachim. Now 6 tvachim equals 1 amah. Sometimes a board that is only 4 tvachim wide or even less can suffice as a wall. In this case, however, where every side of the square is more open than closed, each board must be 6 tvachim wide. V'ovyan konshu, and their thickness can be any amount. And the Mishnah discusses how much space there may be between the double posts. Ubenehen kimlo shte revakot shel shalosh bakar. And between them, there may be a gap the size of 2 teams of 3 oxen each. Now, a team refers here to a group of animals tied together to pull a plow. Now, the commentaries explain, it's going to get a little into math. We are going to use the explanation of the Seder art scroll as usual. A single team of 3 oxen is 5 amot wide, each ox having a width of 1 2/3 amot, and 2 such teams are 10 amot wide. Therefore, 10 amot is the maximum gap allowed between double posts. If the gap is any wider, 1 or more straight boards must be placed between the double posts so that no gap exceeds 10 amot. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, but Rabbi Yehuda says, Shel arba, the gap between them may be as wide as 2 teams of 4 oxen each. Now, a single team of 4 oxen is 6 2/3 amot, meaning 4 times 1 2/3 amot, and 2 such teams are 13 1/3 amot wide. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, a gap of 13 1/3 amot is permitted between double posts. Only if the gap is wider than 13 1/3 amot must straight posts be erected to narrow it. Now, like we mentioned earlier, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda agree that straight boards can be necessary. They only argue as to when they are necessary. Rabbi Meir holds that a straight board is required even to reduce a gap that is slightly more than 10 amot wide, while Rabbi Yehuda rules that a straight board is required only to narrow a gap slightly wider than 13 1/3 amot. Now, the machloket, the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, can be explained as follows. Both Tanaim agree that there must be enough space for a single team of oxen to enter through one side of the enclosed area at the same time that another team exits through the same side. If the gap would be any smaller, animals using the well during the week when they are tied together in teams would knock down the posts, and the post would then have to be erected anew every Friday before Shabbat. And Rabbi Meir rules that since there are 3 oxen in a standard team, the rabbis permitted the gap to be wide enough to fit 2 teams of 3 oxen each, which is 10 amot. Rabbi Yehuda, however, holds that since in some places a team consists of 4 oxen, the rabbis allowed a gap wide enough for 2 teams of 4 oxen each, which is 13 1/3 amot. Now, the general rule is that a partition is not valid if it has a gap of more than 10 amot, like we learned in chapter 1, Mishnah 8. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda permits a gap of 13 1/3 amot because the law limiting a gap to 10 amot is rabbinic, and the rabbis did not apply it in the case of pilgrims traveling to Yerushalayim. Now, the Mishnah explains how these 2 teams of either 3 or 4 oxen are measured. Kishurot velo mutarot. The width of each team is measured when the oxen are tied, so there is less space between them, and not when they are loose. Achat nichneset v'achat yotzet. The combined width of both teams together is measured when one team is entering and one is exiting, which requires slightly more space than 2 teams moving in the same direction. Now, a measurement given in amot can refer either to exact amot, amot atzevot, or to long amot, amot sochakot. Now, the Mishnah teaches here that the gap between the double posts should be measured in long amot. 2 teams of 3 oxen each, passing each other in opposite directions, have a total width of 10 long amot, and if each team consists of 4 oxen, the total width is 13 1/3 long amot. Now, an exact amah is 24 finger breadths long, while long amah is 1/2 finger breadth longer. That's about a 2% difference, as the notes explain. Now, if the 2 teams would be measured when moving in the same direction, their combined width would be 10 exact amot according to Rabbi Meir, or 13 1/3 exact amot according to Rabbi Yehuda. However, since they are measured when moving in opposite directions, their combined width is 10 or 13 1/3 long amot, which again we said the difference between an exact ama and a long ama is a difference of about 2%. And that is in Rabotai of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet now defines how large an area can be converted by the double posts into a private domain. Mutar la'akrib la'be'er. It is permitted to place the double post close to the well, making the enclosed area smaller. Ubilvad shetiyeh para roshah verubah bifnim b'shotah. Provided that enough space remains for a cow to stand with its head and most of its body inside the area and drink. Now the head and most of the body of a cow is 2 amot long, as the Gemara says on page 19a. Now the rabbis based the measurement on a cow because a cow is an animal of average size. However, the same minimum distance of 2 amot applies regardless of whether one is drawing water for a smaller animal such as a goat or a larger animal such as a camel, as the Ritba explains. Now if the space is any smaller than enough space for a cow to stand with its head and most of its body inside the area and drink, if it's any smaller, at least half of the cow will be outside the enclosed area, which makes it more likely that a person taking water to the animal will transfer the water from the private domain, which we made with the double post, into the adjacent public domain. Mutar lachi kolshu. It is permitted to distance the double post from the well by any amount, making the enclosed area as large as one wants.